So when we saw the Asus ROG Flow Z13, we called it the future of gaming laptops. Compared to what we expect from a so-called gaming laptop, this is, pardon the pun, an absolute game changer. Not only that, but with a 16:10 display, a 12th gen Intel Core i9 CPU inside, RTX 3050 Ti GPU, DDR5 RAM, a PCIe Gen 4 SSD, and an RTX 3080 fueled superpower that we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. On paper, this has the specs to match our hype, but does it stick the landing? Is the future a worthwhile purchase right now? Let's find out. But before we do, if you're a nerd like us, be a mate and subscribe for more videos like this in the future. Cheers. The whole look and feel of it is definitely more Blade Runner than laptop, and to be fair, I'm here for it. Starting with the black aluminium, not aluminum, with bold embossed lines. On the back, you've got this little peekaboo window that lets you see all the insides, which it's seriously cool. And you've got a little dash of red in the corner with this little ROG flag that hints, as you saw before, to the kickstand. And this isn't any kind of like 2 or 3 step kickstand like there was in old Surfaces. This can go all the way back to 170 degrees. This sort of versatility has breathed new life into my PC gaming, whether I'm sat near a coffee table and just want to play Forza Horizon 5 fast, or if I want to fold it back up and play an RTS like Age of Empires 4 quickly. Either way, you can find a posture that is comfortable for you to game in. But I'm getting ahead of myself because, of course, to do PC gaming, you need a keyboard, and the keyboard cover here is made from a similar Alcantara fabric material that you'd find on the Surface Pro keyboard covers. And of course, you're getting the incredibly strong magnetic connectors here to keep everything nice and secure. And while the touchpad is pretty small on this, the keyboard itself is a joy to use with plenty of travel on each key. And of course, the minimization of everything into this tablet form factor leads to dimensions that are simply unheard of in gaming laptops, especially when compared to similarly priced small boys like the Alienware X14 and the Asus ROG Zephyrus G14. And the screen itself is also quite a looker too. It's a 13.4-inch IPS touchscreen panel with a 1920 by 1200 resolution and a 120Hz refresh rate, and also that 16:10 aspect ratio, which is good for productivity and good for particular genres of games like real-time strategy. And with a pretty damn good average brightness of 454 nits and a 102% sRGB color gamut, every scene feels vivid and color accurate, and the brightness is good enough that you're able to play games on this on public transport in direct sunlight. And plus, with this being a tablet, tapping on this feels responsive and immediate. And yes, it's a tablet, so you get an 8-megapixel camera on the back. Here's a picture. It's about what you expect. And while the front-facing webcam is more potato than prime shooter, it's nice to have this for when you need to do work on this thing by day and do some video calling. Now, how's about we get stuck into the main course here? The model we have packs an Intel Core i9 12900H CPU, an RTX 3050 Ti GPU, 16 gigs of LPDDR5 RAM, and a 1TB PCIe Gen 4 SSD. The end result is a redonkulous Geekbench 5.4 score, which slots in just behind the Alienware X14, but absolutely blows the Ryzen 6900HS in the Zephyrus G14 out of the water. You can beef up those results a little bit more with the turbo mode, but also conversely, the reduced power delivery on the battery mode can drop those scores quite significantly too. But the end result for me on a day-to-day basis was no matter what work I threw at this speed demon handled it without breaking a sweat. And kudos to the thermal management in here, because I gotta be honest with you, the fans in here are nowhere near as loud as I expected them to be. And with all of that, even at the highest possible performance levels, the fans are rarely that much of a distraction, to the point that I was able to play a level of Halo Infinite on here with turbo mode on without waking my partner. But shh, don't tell her that. And I hope she doesn't watch this video. But besides that, that means 2 things. Optimal performance even in intense situations, and you can whip this out on a train without drawing too much attention to yourself with some loud fan whirring noises. Now, we'll go into the built-in RTX 3050 Ti a little bit later on in this video, but if you want a little more power than the relatively entry-level GPU you'll find in here, the ROG Z13 does have a superpower. The proprietary port on the Flow Z13 means you can connect Asus's ROG eGPU to this, which has an RTX 3080 mobile graphics card. The end result after all of our testing is up to a 150% increase in all of our 3D Mark benchmarking and over double the frame rate at the highest settings across all the games that we tested. When you think about it, that is ludicrous power to pump out of a 13-inch tablet. But of course you need to be plugged into the mains to make the most of this sort of thing. This isn't really the kind of thing that you'll take out on the go with you. Maybe something that you'll plug into when you get home. But there are some problems here. Nothing that makes the Z13 a massive deal breaker, but there's just some things you should know about. So let's start with the obvious. Chances are when you just heard me talk about the specs before, you may have got a little bit nervous about the fact that I said the words RTX 3050 Ti. I mean, when we think about this as a gaming laptop crammed into a tablet form factor, it's pretty good, but we can't just keep saying that this is a better Surface Pro, because that's moving the goalposts a little bit. End of the day, hunters may fawn over the form factor, but if it doesn't offer you a good price to performance ratio, then we've got a problem. In our specific lab testing, this pretty commonly fell behind the Zephyrus G14 and the Alienware X14. In fact, in past Asus ROG laptops, we have noticed quite a difference between test results with the mux switch on and off. That physical switch that potentially provides better graphics by connecting the GPU directly to the display. But in the Flow Z13, the difference is either super marginal or completely non-existent, as the 12th gen Intel Core i9 CPU is pretty OP when paired to an entry-level GPU. Now in practice, when you throw all the numbers into the bin and you focus on real-world usage, it's not as bad as I'm bigging it up to be. That is the beauty of PC gaming, that you're able to go into settings, tweak things a little bit, and manage to still hit a good 30 to 60 FPS in most of the games that you want to play. But in a system at this price, you should expect more. Another noticeable problem is the port array. Again, I get it's a tablet, but for gamers, one Thunderbolt 4 port that is usually taken up by charging, one USB Type A, and a 3.5mm headphone jack alongside the micro SD card slot in the back is just not enough. And no, giving users an additional 4 USB-A ports, the Ethernet, a HDMI and display port on the eGPU is not an acceptable workaround, because A, you're keeping this thing at home, and B, I'd rather have, let's say, a couple of extra USB ports on here and a HDMI rather than paying $1,500 for them all on this thing. Next up, and probably the least surprising problem with this, is that the battery life isn't that good. For general work, it seems to do all right. The 56 watt-hour cell in here is capable of lasting up to 6 hours and 14 minutes in our battery informant web surfing test. For gaming, not so. With a PC Mark gaming test length of just over 1 hour before dying a death, and that story kind of extends to its competition. For browsing, this is longer than the Alienware X1, but it is significantly weaker than both the X1 and the ROG Zephyrus G14. So if you're going to take this on a train or a plane, make sure you have that plug with you. And finally, much like my gripes about the G14, which you can watch that video by clicking the eye above my head, we've got to talk about price here. This fully loaded model of the Flow Z13 comes in at $1,900 or 1,900 quid. And as I said before, you're spending an extra 1,500 bucks on the eGPU. When you're looking at the Flow Z13 specifically, you can get a similarly spec'd Alienware X14 for $300 less. Throw in the eGPU and you're easily spending well over $3,000 on this whole setup. That's 800 more than the MSI rated GE66 with the same CPU and RTX 3070 Ti GPU. And it's over $400 more than the MSI Vector with RTX 3080, both of which also, by the way, have double the RAM. My favorite daytime TV show when I was unemployed, and I'm not talking just between jobs, I'm talking like greeting the delivery man in your underpants level of unemployed, was Bargain Hunt. And speaking like the big man David Dickinson himself, Google him if you live in the US, he does kind of look a bit like a handbag. You can pick up far more powerful systems than this that are comparatively cheap as chips. And this is what really cuts to the core of the ROG Flow Z13, because on the face of it, there's not that much to grumble about here. I mean, the battery life in this gaming system the size of a tablet isn't great, Surprise, surprise. The middling graphics performance isn't that great for the cost, and the I/O situation is pretty dire, but the display is pretty to look at for gaming and work. This thing has a lot more performance than I expected it to have. Thermal management is fantastic. The keyboard cover has a nice, clicky, comfortable feel to it. And as I said up top, that versatility of being able to just get this tablet out and play games in whatever position is simply unmatched compared to any gaming laptop out there. So I stand by what we said in calling this the future of gaming laptops, but the future could do with a little more time in the oven, and the future is really fucking expensive. And that's it. Thank you so very much for watching. So what do you think? Is this Surface Pro form factor going to be the future of gaming laptops? Or do you think it's going to be something else? Go ahead and let me know in the comments. And don't forget, likes and subs if you enjoyed the video, and you can read the full review on laptopmag.com. I've been the awfully English Jason England, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Thank you.